Hello everyone, this is my review of Doctor Who and Thin Ice, the third episode of Series 10 of Doctor Who. For those of you who are watching my channel for my rants on Doctor Who, you guys are probably going to be disappointed again because I have to say I rather enjoyed this episode again. I mean, it wasn't anything like Genesis of the Daleks or The Deadly Assassin, but I mean, I could at least enjoy it. It was, as far as new Doctor Who standards are, which are very low, I enjoyed it, and I'm gonna touch on some of the things that I liked about it. Now, a lot of the things that I found that seemed to work in the episode's favor, from what I've read on the Classic Whovians Facebook page, some of you guys, these are things that you guys didn't like about it, which I find that kind of curious because a lot of the things that you guys dislike about New Doctor Who, it's things that New Doctor Who does differently than the original series does. And in the case of this episode, a lot of the things that this episode did that I felt worked in its favor, and they're things that you guys didn't like, are things that the original series did. One of the things that I noticed right off the top of right off the bat was the pacing for this episode. The pacing was much more. It was slower. It's again, I'm comparing it to the past few seasons of Doctor Who, particularly in the Moffat era. The pacing was much slower. The story unfolded much slower, and I was able to keep up with what was going on. The story, it didn't try to cram far too much. It didn't try to do too much because I mean you're on such a short time frame, only 45 minutes. So there's not really a whole lot you could do in terms of narrative and story. So I like that the episode didn't try to do more than what could have been crammed into 45 minutes. The story was sufficient enough that it didn't feel rushed in the 45-minute slot. I felt like some of the screen time was taken up on just kind of unnecessarily. Like the whole, we're having to go through this whole thing again with the companion and the Doctor, where the companion has to question the Doctor's morality. There was the scene where Bill was asking whether or not the Doctor had ever killed anyone, and I realized that they're trying to kind of reboot the series and they're trying to present the series for new viewers, but I've never been I don't agree with that at all. That's a discussion for another video, but I don't agree with that approach at all. I don't know why the series needs another reintroduction, because you've got millions and millions of viewers who are familiar with what Doctor Who is, and with each new season you have maybe even 1,000 or so new viewers, and you're pandering to these select few viewers at the expense of everyone else, of all your existing viewers, because all of the rest of us, we don't need to see all this crap again where we have to go through this song and dance of questioning the Doctor's morality and figuring out where he stands and who he is and how old he is and what he's seen and blah blah blah, and how he treats situations like this where people die. We don't need to go through all that again, okay, because we've been going through that for the last 51 years, okay? We all know where the Doctor stands on those situations, so we don't, you're making the rest of us kind of sit through this crash course of 50 years of Doctor Who for the sake of a few extra viewers, when if they want to find out that kind of stuff, just give them some incentive to go watch the last 50 years of Doctor Who. Does that make sense? I know that we're trying to develop the chemistry between the Doctor and his new companion, Bill, but this whole morality thing, I think, it was taking up too much time, and it was time that could have been devoted to the actual story. Then, as someone else has already pointed out on the Classic Whovians page, the last 5 minutes of the episode had nothing to do with the story whatsoever. It was just kind of tacked on at the end for the sake of furthering Moffat's story arc for this season. And the thing that I dislike about this is we're 3 episodes in now to this season, and it's obvious now that the whole vault under the university or whatever, I guess, is what's going to be the arc for the season. It's basically the Pandorica again, is what it is, in my opinion. So it's Moffat 101. It's just a mystery box, and because you can never seem to write anything else. So now, like every other season Moffat has done, we're left questioning throughout the whole season what's behind the doors, what's in the vault, what's in the Pandorica, blah blah blah. So, but in the case of this season, like at least the Pandorica thing, the Pandorica arc, at least it was somewhat tied to the individual stories throughout the season. In this case, we've had 2 episodes now, Smile and Thin Ice, where the individual stories themselves had nothing to do with the overall season arc whatsoever. So when you do that, you have situations like this episode where you have the first 40 minutes of the episode devoted to the actual story, and then the last 5 minutes you're just going to have to tack on the end, a few minutes of forwarding the story arc, and it feels like an afterthought, and it just feels like, okay, this season could pretty much stand on its own without this story arc, because I think the only other episode that Moffat's writing this season is the 2-part finale. So I'm almost positive that this is going to be the routine for the rest of the season, where we're going to have, more or less fairly good episodes, well presented episodes, but they're going to be suffering from a time constraint because we have to allot the last 5 to 10 minutes to furthering a story arc that had nothing to do with the individual episodes anyway. So it's just kind of like, okay, if you've got a story to tell Moffat about the vault underneath the university, just save that for the 2-part finale, because you're talking about 5 minutes here, 2 minutes there, 3 minutes there over the course of the season, when you got 2 episodes to work with at the end of the season. That's more than enough time to cover all of this little stuff that you're covering over the course of the season, where you're sacrificing screen time for these other stories. You could just fit that in the 2 stories you have allotted for resolving that arc. So instead of making it a season-long arc, just make it a separate 2-part story at the end of the season. So because from what I've seen so far, whatever's in the vault has nothing to do with what we've seen in the last 2 episodes. It didn't even have anything to do with the first episode. So it's almost like, okay, it's just an irrelevant plot. It's an irrelevant story. It's not playing any pivotal role in what we've seen so far. So you could literally, assuming that the last 2 episodes of the season are going to expand on this arc and resolve it, you could literally cut out all of these other scenes apart from the introduction, introducing the vault in the first episode. You could cut out everything else, and the finale still works. In my opinion, those are really the 2 main things I think that just really sacrificed screen time unnecessarily for this episode. But I like that the pacing was slow and the story developed slowly, considering in spite of those facts, in spite that it had roughly 35 to 40 minutes to work with, maybe even 30 minutes to work with for the actual meat of the story. Okay, so another thing that I liked about this one, and this is another thing that you guys didn't seem to like, that I noticed, and to me it's more in line with what I've been looking for from New Doctor Who, was the underuse of special effects. The story, the way the story is written, there's supposed to be this big giant creature underneath the Thames. So there's this giant creature living in the Thames, and if this had been a story done in the original series, there's no way, given the budgetary constraints of the original series, there's no way that there could have been like a practical effect showing like a big giant creature the size of the Thames, and you couldn't have had like you could not have had like a shot of London or whatever with this whole creature stretched out the length of the Thames or whatever. So I like that in this episode that they've kind of gone back to Doctor Who's roots in that respect, where I think the shot where the creature was, it was a distant shot where the creature was way out in the Thames. That was the only really full body shot you got of the creature. Every other shot was really close up where you couldn't see it all, and like there was one shot of its eye, there was one shot of its mouth, and they were obscured. Like there was a shot where just his fins coming up out of the water. These very obscure shots, and that's how the original series would tackle large creature special effects. Given the budgetary constraints, is they would just have like obscured shots or just really close-up shots where you never saw a shot where the creature was whole. And I like that about this episode. Not necessarily for its nostalgic value, but because I like that they've dialed back their use of CG. It's not. It's the episode relies on the performances of the actors and the story itself to propel itself instead of relying on special effects. And to me, that you get a better story when you present it that way, because that's one of the reasons why the stories were so good in the original series, is because they couldn't rely on special effects to tell the story. They had the story had to be written good, because it was the performances of the actors and the way the story was presented and written that would carry the bulk of the weight. So in my opinion, the underuse of CG and the underuse of special effects in this episode, again, helped this episode. I'm still liking the chemistry between Bill and the Doctor, and it's really a shame, because to me, this is the first season where Capaldi's Doctor, he seems to be written, how I would picture his Doctor being. Every now and then you'll get a scene where he's kind of running around, sort of like reminiscent of like Matt Smith or David Tennant or whatever, but he's more calm, he's more collected, and he's more intellectual. The Doctor in this season so far seems to be more about assessing the situation and trying to think his way out of situations. So again, I like the chemistry between Bill and the Doctor. I like how the Doctor's character has been written so far this season, and I also like the character of Bill, the companion. To me, she's the best companion that Moffat has written since he took over in 2010, and I like that she's not a she's not like this all-important person in the universe like Clara was, or she's not this. Her character is not tied to like the entire Doctor Who universe like Amy Pond and like Clara were. She's just like an ordinary present-day Earth female who is tagging along with the Doctor. And again, she's serving as the audience's mouthpiece by asking questions, inquiring, and kind of speaking for the audience to get answers from the Doctor. I'm not trying to degrade her role, the role of the companion, but that's just the way it is. I mean, the Doctor is the lead character, and the companion character, whether it be male or female, it's not because she's female, or it's the companion role in Doctor Who is to serve as a mouthpiece for the audience. So after, 5 years of being in control of Doctor Who, Moffat finally manages to get the companion role right, and it's a shame because this is the last season for Capaldi, and this is the only season for Bill as far as I know, and we finally get a winning team in the TARDIS. This episode did kind of have a twist on the Monster of the Week thing, and I kind of have mixed feelings on this. I kind of have mixed feelings that the actual monster wasn't necessarily malicious or anything. He was just a victim of circumstance or something like that, And now this is not the first time that Moffat has done this. It's actually happened. It actually happens pretty regularly in New Doctor Who, especially under Moffat, where it's kind of Moffat's way of smoothing out the whole Monster of the Week thing, where this monster is really scary, but actually no, he's not scary. He's just a poor little sap who's been who's undergoing some misfortune. I don't know how I feel about this kind of throwaway line that the monster has always been there in the Thames, and I mean, that's kind of hard to swallow. And someone's already pointed out that it's probably due to the constrained time frame that this episode had. There just wasn't enough time to adequately explain how the creature got there. So they probably had to omit that whole thing. I'm sure the writer in the first draft, the writer probably did have an explanation for how the creature got there, but they had to axe that because there wasn't enough time to cover that. I mean, come on. I mean, the Thames is seldom ever frozen over, and I don't know how deep it is, but are you telling me there's just been this giant fish living under the Thames for all these years? And no one's ever noticed? Like, when people were building bridges across the Thames, even then they didn't notice? That's kind of hard to swallow. The thing that I did like about it was that the main villain, or whatever, in the story it wasn't a monster of any sort. It was just a regular human being. And when I see episodes like this, I'm kind of reminded of original series episodes, kind of like the Reboss Operation, where there was a monster in the Reboss Operation. It was like that little, whatever the creature was that was guarding the the chamber or whatever, that was the only monster in that story, and it was kind of like a minor part. The major villains in that story were the Graf Vindicate. So so they were just like regular people, just like regular human beings. They were the main villains. So I like that for once the new Doctor Who can actually change its formula, and it doesn't have to be like a monster of the week sort of thing where the Doctor is going toe to toe with some monster like the Daleks or the Cybermen or the Zygons or the Silurians or the Ice Warriors or something. It keeps things fresh. The whole commentary on slavery and everything, I didn't see any problem with that either. This is not the first time that Doctor Who has addressed that, and it's only fair that that sort of thing would come up, given that Bill's character is African American. And actually, I don't know if anyone else has picked up on this or not, but the episode, there's several levels of depth to that commentary. The creature being in chains and the white guy kind of enslaving the creature to exploit it for the resources. That's kind of like a undertones. It's kind of commentary on how slavery was during the 1800s. So I don't know if anybody else picked up on that, but I did. I thought that was well done. I thought it was it wasn't too obvious, and it's one of those episodes that makes you think. And when Doctor Who can do that, to me, it's been written well, when it can make you think. I'm giving this episode a lot of praise, aren't I? I think I'm giving this episode more praise than I did last week's. I do have some things that I didn't like about it, so just bear with me. The teal color grading. Okay, I know that everyone keeps telling me that anytime a modern television show or film is set in an environment that's supposed to be cold, that's why it's tinted teal like that. And I still don't understand that, okay? Because tinting it teal doesn't make it feel any colder. There were a couple of shots, like whenever the Doctor and Bill were in the carriage, those were not color graded teal. And there's a couple of scenes when they're outside of the big house. Those were not color graded teal. All of the scenes inside the house, they were not color graded teal. As a matter of fact, one of the shots that I remember distinctly is at the end of the episode. There's a shot outside of the house. I think it's when the kids are first showing up there. The color looks very natural. I mean, the snow is white. The house is kind of a peachy color or tan, and there's no teal tinting to it. Everything looks natural color. So, I mean, this thing was kind of back and forth on that. I mean, the underwater scenes when the Doctor and Bill were underwater, I can kind of give that a pass because you're underwater, and naturally you're going to have kind of a blue tint for underwater. But whenever they were on top of the ice, when there was like the fog and everything, right when the episode started, there was just too much of that teal color grading, and I know that I'm being nitpicky, but I just hate that, and it's unnecessary in my opinion, because if you had it natural color, I'm assuming everything would be kind of like gray and white, and the teal color doesn't make it feel any colder to me. When I say I liked how last week they didn't do it at all. The first episode of the season seemed to do it a little bit, but this episode seemed to kind of be back and forth on it. So I don't know, maybe if they're trying to kind of ease this series out of that, which would be great. Now, somebody's already pointed out that this episode is basically just a redressed The Beast Below, and I agree. It's more or less roughly the same story as The Beast Below. The core of the plot is the same as The Beast Below. You've got a big giant creature living under, a city, and it's being exploited, blah blah blah. So it's pretty much, in that sense, it's the same as Beast Below. But as I've already mentioned on the Doctor Who page, The Beast Below was nearly 5 years ago, and this is not the first time that Doctor Who has kind of recycled a story idea. And in my opinion, it was recycled sufficiently and changed sufficiently that it didn't really detract from the experience to me. Because I never even made that distinction until I read it on Facebook, where somebody else had made the comparison to The Beast Below. I'm usually fussing about Doctor Who having kids in it, and this episode has several kids in it. I can kind of see why the kids were in this episode because of, it was set kind of in a festive period when the Thames was frozen over, and they had all these they had this sort of carnival or whatever set up going on the Thames. So naturally you're going to have little kids running around out there, playing and stuff. But as my wife is always saying, having a kid in an episode like this and having the kid be put in danger, and like it was in this one where the kid allegedly dies, that is the cheapest possible way you can generate suspense with your audience. You had adults in this episode get swallowed up by the ice also. And I mean, having the adult swallowed up by the ice is enough to convey that these fish are dangerous. I was kind of shocked whenever the kid fell in the water and like his hand's just sticking up out of the ice, and then he drops the sonic screwdriver or whatever, and then his hand disappears. I mean, to me, that's the most disturbing death scene that New Doctor Who has had since it started in 2005. This is the thing that bothered me the most about this episode, was that it wasn't a death scene. Not only did we get reminded that this kid supposedly died when the Doctor and Bill were underwater, we find his hat underwater. He ends up not dying. At the end of the episode, it's another one of those everybody lives endings, and that just, I mean, you were so close. You were so close to having almost a well-written, well-presented new episode of Doctor Who, but at the very last minute, you ruin the whole thing with this everybody lives ending. I mean, would anybody really have cared? Anybody watching, would they really have cared next week if the people that got eaten by the fish had died or not? I wouldn't have. Okay, I mean, it's a flippin' fish as big as the Thames. It has to eat. Okay, it's only natural that it's going to eat whatever is running around up there on top of the ice. I hate that they take this whole benign monster thing too far, where no, the monster didn't actually eat them. He was just, keeping them safe inside of his belly underwater, until he was released. I mean, what was he going to do? Okay, all of these people, he's been eating people for long before the Doctor and Bill got there. So what, he was just going to keep them indefinitely? The fish didn't know he was going to get released. So, I mean, what, was he just going to keep him in his belly forever? So, I don't know. That whole thing that just kind of ruined it for me at the end, was whenever it was like everybody lives sort of thing. And, I mean, come on, Moffat, you grow some balls. Okay, I know some of your audience are kids, but they can deal with it. Okay, they can deal with people not surviving. I mean, we had the same happen last week. You killed people last week on screen. That's really the main thing that I didn't like about this episode, was those two things: the teal color grading and the fact that at the very end of the episode it was like, oh, everybody lives sort of thing. That's really about it. I mean, it's an episode I would consider myself watching again. I can see myself watching it again. In fact, I do kind of want to see it again. So, because tonight I watched it on BBC America, so we had to sit through all these commercials. So it's kind of hard to really enjoy it, because you're sitting through commercial breaks every 5 or 10 minutes. So I'd like to watch it all at once. I would say it was at least as good as last week. It may have been a little bit better than last week. The thing is, I know a lot of you guys didn't like it, but the thing is, from my point of view, I mean, my expectations for New Doctor Who are so low now that it takes is something like this to impress me. Like I said, it wasn't a grand spectacular story like Genesis of the Daleks or The Deadly Assassin, but as far as new Doctor Who standards are concerned, it was higher than what we've been getting the last few seasons. So at the very least, it's an improvement. It's a step in the right direction. Of course, I've already seen the trailer for next week. I don't know how I feel about next week. I think that's going to be kind of a mixed bag. It looks like it's going to be Hyde again with kids. That's really it. That's my review of Doctor Who and Thin Ice. I think the episode could have been titled better, because the Thin Ice wasn't really the hinge pin of the story. There you have it. 2 episodes back to back that didn't flat out piss me off. So they must, maybe somebody finally woke up over there. Okay, so that's my review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So I'll see you guys next week.